What's up guys, MTG Matthew back with another, not in a Strat Crimson video, but instead, yesterday we got some teasers for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, which is going to come out in February, so there's still some more time to go until we get to enjoy that new set. But yesterday there was a teaser via Twitch, via Magic's Twitch channel, with Mark Rosewater. And not only did they talk about the idea for the set, how it came to be and so forth, but we also got some juicy previews to look at. And that's what we're going to be doing in this video. I want to try to keep this short because this is just a teaser. We don't know any other cards from the set, so evaluating them is in the context of the rest of the set is rather impossible. But let's just take a look anyway and try to evaluate the cards based on the standard we currently have. And maybe this will give some insights to you. So hope you guys enjoy this. And the first card we're starting with is Kyodai Soul of Kamigawa. Now, disclaimer, this first card and the second card I'm going to talk about, these were not the official previews from yesterday, but instead supposedly these were cards that were leaked. So these might be fake, but let's just, for the sake of the video, assume that these are real and discuss them, right? And maybe these are real, and then we'll just already have some insights on those cards. So, Kyodai Soul of Kamigawa, it's a rare Dragon Spirit, it's legendary, in white, 4 mana 3/3, has flash, has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, another target permanent gains indestructible for as long as you control Kyodai. And then you can pay Wooburg to give it +5/+5 until end of turn. So I was looking at this card and thinking where this card would fit and what its strengths are. So let's talk firstly about the enter the battlefield effect. Since Kyodai has flash, the ETB is basically like a counterspell against removal from your opponent, right? If your opponent tries to destroy one of your Planeswalkers, one of your, any permanent really, right? You can flash Kyodai in, give it indestructible, and then your opponent's removal spells fizzle. So that's really cool. That being said, I actually looked up a rule because I wasn't sure how it works, but if you flash in Kyodai to protect a Planeswalker against combat damage, the loyalty count still get removed. And if a Planeswalker's loyalty goes to 0, the Planeswalker goes to the graveyard. So this means Kyodai can't protect your Planeswalkers from damage or combat damage, so it can protect you also against like a burn down the house, because burn down the house deals damage, but it can protect your Planeswalkers against destroy effects, alright? So right away, this enter the battlefield effect, protecting something else against removal is pretty cool, pretty powerful. And when I look at this card, it's a dragon, it's a spirit, it's 4 mana. I imagine the best place for this card would be an Azorius Flash style of deck, where you, where you have flyers you can flash in. There are quite some actually already in standard. Most notably, there's Spectral Adversary in blue, from the Adversary cycle from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. And the idea of an Azorius Flash flyer deck would be to just, go over the top with your flyers, to hit your opponent in the face with your flyers. And since they have flash, you can always react, hold open a counterspell, and so forth. And I think Kyodai would be a perfect fit for that kind of deck, because you can flash it in, you would protect one of your other creatures, and at the same time develop a free fly on board. So that's really cool. I could also see this card being played as a win condition in a control deck for 2 reasons. One reason being is that in a control deck you would probably have some or a lot of Planeswalkers. So if you imagine this card in an Esper Shell, you could flash in Kyodai, protect your Planeswalkers against removal, and then you have this free fly on the board. And if you put the World Tree into your deck, which turns all your lands into mana production of any sort, you could treat Kyodai as a win condition, right? Because the Wooburg, give it +5/+5 on the end of turn. That's 8/8 of damage in the air. So that seems pretty cool. And then there's maybe like potential for like Boros Dragon, mid-range dragons, but that's really just an idea far out there. I think the pieces are slowly coming together, but right now there isn't really a Boros mid-range dragons deck in standard. So that being said, I think this is a pretty cool card if it's real. As I said, I could see this most played in like a Azorius Flash Flyer deck. And then apart from that, any deck, any like control deck that wants to protect Planeswalkers from destroy effects. This can protect your Planeswalkers and also serve as a win condition. So I think Kyodai is actually a pretty cool, potentially powerful card. Next up we got Takenuma, Abandoned Mire. As I said, this also is supposedly leaked, so it might not be real. But it's a legendary land. It taps for black. Notably, it comes into play untapped. And it's got the channel keyword. So as far as I understand channel simply means that you can discard this card while it's in your hand and then you get an effect. And Takenuma, if you discard it for 3 and a black, you mill 3 cards, then return a creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that the legendary tag is a big downside on a land, because in Magic you always want to hit your land drops, and if you run more than one Takenuma Abandoned Mire in your deck, sure you can use the second copy to use the channel ability, but what if you actually wanted to play a land, right? This potentially takes up a land slot in your deck. So that's a bit downside. And to keep in mind while deck building, right? Maybe you treat this card actually as not as a land slot. Like, let's say you have 2 copies. One copy of it you treat as an actual land slot in your deck, and a second copy you treat it as if it were a spell that can also be a land, potentially. So with that out of the way, what I find most notably about this card is that it also returns Planeswalkers to your hand. So what I think of immediately when I see this card is there's this mono black control deck in standard right now, which is actually really powerful and runs a lot of Planeswalkers. We have Sorens in there, we have Lolths in there. I think some versions even run the 6-mana Liliana. And for those decks, I think this is a perfect fit, right? Run 2 of these, and then later in the game you can just discard Takenuma to just get a Lolth back from your graveyard. You can also do this in instant speed, and this way you just get some more juice out of your decks, right? And especially in a mono-colored deck, you already have so many basic untapped lands that it's rather easy to fit in more useful lands that can do more than just give you mana. And then the second thing I would point out is there's also like a mono black zombie aggro deck right now that also runs Jidar, the Ghoul Caller, right? Which is a legendary creature that's already in the deck. So in that kind of deck, this channel ability would already only cost 3 mana. So that could be a fit. In general, I think Takenuma would be just like a fine card. It's not like overpowered by any means, but it's just some nice, useful stuff. And supposedly Kamigawa is also going to be focused a lot around legendaries, so maybe you even get we even get more cards in Kamigawa that would naturally reduce the cost of this channel ability, because I don't think you would want to put this card into your deck and then make sure you have enough legendary creatures to reduce its cost. I think a deck already needs to run legendary creatures by itself, and then Takenuma is a nice upgrade. So in general, I would say Takenuma would be useful as a 1 or 2 of in any control shell with a lot of Planeswalkers, and then potentially in other creature-based decks in black that happen to run some legendaries. Alright, now that we got the first 2 cards out of the way that were supposedly leaks, let's get to the cards that are 100% real. And we're starting out with Hidetsugu Devouring Chaos. 4 mana 4/4 legendary Old Demon in black. You can pay 1 black to sacrifice a creature to scry 2. And you can pay 2 and a red to exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. When you exile an online card this way, Hidetsugu deals damage equal to the exiled card's mana value to any target. So Hidetsugu, I think, in general, is a pretty cool concept, pretty cool creature. Let's talk about the activate abilities first. So the sack outlet is nice. However, you have to pay mana to get the sack effect. And also, Hidetsugu costs 4 mana, and at the 4 mana slot, we already have Immostone Predator as a sack outlet, which is really good, because sacrificing a creature doesn't cost any mana. And Immostone Predator in general is just a very powerful card. So, that being said, the first ability helps you getting value out of the second ability, right? Because you get to scry too, and then you can adjust your top deck in a way that when you activate the second ability, first of all, you know you have enough mana to play it, but also then if you play it, you deal damage to any target. And the second ability is actually really, really good. First off, it actually draws you a card because it says play that card. So you can also play lands with this. And then, you know, 3 mana, draw a card. And then let's say, what would be a good example? Like, let's go very simple. Let's say you play this in like your Rakdos Sacrifice deck. You pay 3 mana, and then you get, what's it called? The Merchant, the 3 mana Merchant that gives you a treasure. Play your 3 mana Merchant, right? You need 6 mana in total to do this, but that's playable. Or like, that's doable. And then you also deal 3 damage to any target on top. That's really, really good. And this effect, the second one, only gets better later in the game, because then you have more mana, so you can play more expensive stuff from the top of your library and deal more damage this way. So I think Hidetsugu would be a nice fit in a Rakdos Sacrifice deck, and Rakdos Sacrifice is already actually a really good deck in Standard. But you would only want to play like 1 or 2 of these, because the 4-drop slot is already very crowded with Immostone Predators, and I also think Stanzia Uprising is really, really good. You want to have this in a Rakdos Sacrifice deck. Then there's also Sorin, just as a generally good Planeswalker. So at the end of the day, I think Hidetsugu will have a hard time finding a slot in the deck, because there are so many other good 4-drops. But as a 1 or 2 off in Rakdos deck, I could see this being played and being just a really nice addition. Alright, now we get to the real juice here. So we got Atsushi the Blaring Sky. Our first mythic here, 4 mana, 4/4, Flying Trample, Dragon Spirit at Mythic Rare in red. And when Atsushi the Blazing Sky dies, choose 1, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards, or create 3 treasure tokens. Now, first off, before I talk about this card, I want to mention that Atsushi is going to be part of a cycle. So every color is going to get a legendary mythic dragon, and they all will have effects when they die. So that's worth noting. And Atsushi, I think it's an incredible card. So first of all, let's look at the worst case for this card. The worst case for this card is you pay 4 mana, you play this, your opponent immediately removes this, and then you either choose to ramp into something better by creating 3 treasure tokens, or you basically draw 2 cards. And remember, you can play those cards until the end of your next turn. So even if you play this on turn 4 with 4 mana, you have no mana left, your opponent removes this, you get to draw 2 cards, and you can actually play those cards. You can also play lands from that, and anything else that you draw. So that by itself is already an amazing ability, right? It replaces itself with 2 cards, or the ramps into something really, really big. Another thing I want to note about Atsushi is that it's a 4 mana 4/4 flyer, right? This means that it comes down a turn earlier than Goldspan Dragon, and it trades with Goldspan Dragon, and when it trades with Goldspan Dragon, you get a useful die effect. So even if you're going, let's say you go second against an Is It Turn stack, and your opponent is always up 1 land, you will be able to play Atsushi before your opponent can play the Goldspan Dragon, because it's only 4 mana. And then when you trade, you get a nice die effect. So that's already so good. And I think this card is actually amazing. It can fit in so many decks. This could be a play in like a Gruul mid-range deck. You might want to play mono red and use this as a top end. 4/4 fly in the air with trample that draws you cards. There's also this idea floating out there with like mono red dragons, because red is getting more and more really good dragons. There are already other good dragons at the 4-drop slot. For example, Moonveil Regent, right? But Atsushi, I think, is gonna make the cut there, because this card is just really powerful. And I could even see this being played in like a Rakdos Sacrifice mid-range deck, right? Because on 4 you play this, it's a big threat in the air. And then when it dies, you get die triggers, which you want to have anyway in Rakdos deck. So I think Atsushi is gonna be a very powerful card. And most notably, and that's true for all of these dragons in the cycle, is that usually the legendary tag is a downside. But because of the fact that this has a die trigger, what you can do is, if you're really in need for more cards and you have one copy of Atsushi on the board and you have one in your hand, you can play the second copy just keep one of them, and then you actually get the die trigger from the one dying. So the second copy of Atsushi is never really dead in that way in your hand. So that's also really noteworthy. So all in all, I think Atsushi is gonna be a really powerful, really good card. The only way I see this card won't get played is if the meta doesn't allow for it. But I do think people will find a way to play this card. I think this is a very powerful dragon. Alright, and I saved the best for the last. We actually have a new Planeswalker here. It's Kaito Shizuki. 3 mana, 3 loyalty Planeswalker in Dimir colors. Yes, we actually have a Dimir Planeswalker back in Standard, which I'm really happy about. So let's read Kaito. He has a static ability saying, at the beginning of your end step, if Kaito Shizuki enters the battlefield this turn, he phases out. Alright? So the way this works is you play him, and then in that very turn that you played him, at the end of the turn he phases out and comes back at the beginning of your next turn. +1, draw a card, then discard a card unless you attack this turn. -2, create a 1/1 blue ninja creature token with this creature can't be blocked. And -7, you get an emblem with whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a blue or black creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Alright, we have some stuff to unpack here. So let's talk first about the static ability, because I think the static ability really helps make Kaito playable, because the static ability means that if you play Kaito on turn 3 and your opponent does not have instant speed removal, it means that you can actually play Kaito on an empty board, even if your opponent has creatures out, and he will be protected, right? Because he will phase out at the end of turn, your opponent won't be able to interact with it at all. And this means that if you play Kaito in a control deck, you have the luxury, so to say, to play him on an empty board, right? Let's say the first 2 turns you were trying to remove creatures from your opponent, but your opponent still has creatures left on the board. And usually in that situation, it would be really bad to play a Planeswalker, because your opponent can just freely attack it, you have no mana left to interact with your opponent's creatures, and then at most you get 1 loyalty activation out of your Planeswalker, which is really bad. But with Kaito, that's not the case. You can play Kaito on an empty board, on your side of the empty board, right? And he will phase out, protect himself that way. And then on turn 4, you will untap, you will have your full mana plus a whole Planeswalker. So I think that's already really, really good. And this means that you can play Kaito, and for the first turn, he automatically protects himself. And that's really, really nice. And I want to point out one thing here about Kaito, especially with the +1 is, I think, I'm always thinking about like a Dimir control list, and Kaito goes so well together with this little card here. that is currently in Standard, which is Suspicious Stowaway. So let's read this. It's 2 mana 1/1 in blue, Human Rogue Werewolf. This is from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. Suspicious Stowaway can be blocked, and whenever it deals common damage to a player, draw a card and discard a card. And on the backside, it's a 2/1, and when it deals common damage to a player, you simply draw a whole card. And Suspicious Stowaway and Kaito go so well together because you can play the Stowaway on 2, and then on turn 3 you can play Kaito, attack with the Stowaway, and then in the second main phase you activate Kaito to just straight up draw a card, right? Because you have attacked with a creature this turn, Stowaway can't be blocked, so you're always safe to attack there. And this is already like a really good turn 2, turn 3 in a control deck, right? So in that case, you would have, on turn 3, you would have attacked with the Stowaway. You get to loot from the Stowaway, right? Draw a card, discard a card. And then you play Kaito, you draw a whole card from Kaito. Kaito phases out, he's protected until your next turn. And then you untap next turn, you still have a Stowaway on the board, you have a Planeswalker on the board, and you have full mana to protect yourself and all this stuff. So I think that's already really, really good for 3 mana Planeswalker. And then on top of that, you have the -2. So, and there are 2 things to say about the -2 is that you can play Kaito, and if you really desperately need a blocker just for yourself and not for your Planeswalker, you can -2. Kaito gives you a 1/1 to jump block. And again, he's still protected because of his static ability. So that's really cool, but also the -2 automatically makes this +1 work the next turn really, really well, right? Because you can play Kaito, -2, you get a 1/1 that can't be blocked, and then turn after, you attack with the 1/1, get a hit in there, and then if you +1 with Kaito, you just draw a full card. And I imagine that a 3 mana Planeswalker, that just potentially in the right deck can straight up draw a card this turn, should be really, really powerful. But also, even if you don't get to attack, just looting every turn can also be really good. Because of that, I could see this also being played in a reanimator strategy for the looting. But I gotta say, if you play Kaito for the looting, for me it's questionable if Kaito at 3 mana would replace the Celestus, because the Celestus already gives you an option to loot. And the Celestus is hard to remove. It also gives you mana, also gives you some life gain. So if you only play Kaito for the looting, I feel like Celestus is just a better option. And then the -7, it's always, you know, talking about Planeswalkers with regards to their ultimate is always, you know, like a bad idea because you rarely get to the ultimate. However, I feel like Kaito being a 3 mana Planeswalker in control colors, and he can protect himself for the first turn. So basically, if you play him on 3, on turn 4, you have the ability to protect him, and then he's already at 4 loyalty. So I could see a world where it's actually rather easy to get Kaito to its emblem, right? Because you can also always draw your cards or loot you to find those counter spells, find those removal spells. And then the emblem, if you have, let's say, Suspicious Stowaway, you can search the library for a blue or black creature card, put it onto the board. Now, most notably, what comes to mind, a blue creature is Hullbreaker Horror, right? That's gonna be real powerful. And the black creature is gonna be Toxthrill, which is also really powerful. So all in all, the more I think about Kaito, I think it's gonna be a rather powerful Planeswalker, right? The fact that he can put stuff on the board if you need to, but even if you don't, he protects himself for the first turn. That's really, really good. And then all the turns after, he can make your draws better, or make your hand better by looting. I think Kaito is gonna be a player, and the Mire Control is already actually a good standard deck that's out there, and Kaito should be a nice addition. But with that being said, those were the teasers we got from about Kamigawa in Neon Dynasty. I gotta say, I'm really into the art. I think the art is very cool, and For me, initially when I heard about the set, I was a little suspicious whether I would think that this art fits the Magic, but so far I think it actually looks great. The cards look really cool. I like the flavors. So Kamigawa looks to be a really cool set. Let's hope the other cards keep up. And until then, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I see you guys soon.